Welcome to ACM's Vault of Cult. On this episode, we are going to talk about the BMX Bandits.
Yes, the BMX Bandits.
James from King Street Cinema is joining me. We're about to watch the movie. You can hear in the background.
Just the theme music
from the title screen. I have never seen it. The DVD cover describes it as the Citizen Kane of BMX movies.
Damn right.
So I'm excited.
Yes.
Does that mean it's quite slow and overrated?
No.
I like Citizen Kane.
Well, it might be, I don't know, I might be overrating it just because it's a movie I watched as a kid, but it's certainly not slow.
Yeah, good. And what was the other thing you read about it? You said that...
Oh, someone online reckons, someone who's not a professional, obviously, gave a review saying that it's the Goonies rip-off BMX movie, which... it can't be because it was made before the Goonies.
That's preposterous.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to play you the trailer, we're going to watch the film, and then we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
This is what I can't believe it passed me by. It was on TV so much when I was a kid.
Yeah.
BMX Bandits. They're wild in the streets, in a high-flying ride to adventure. It's thrills and spills, fast and furious fun. It's a real blast.
BMX Bandits. We've just watched... I'll say we've just enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely we just enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that a lot of you have actually seen it. It's one that, as I believe we said in the intro, it was on TV a lot, 80s and 90s, and basically it's still around, isn't it, because Nicole Kidman's gone on to become such a big star. And it was probably sort of 10 years after this she got really big. You were saying when we were watching it, her first Hollywood movie was Days of Thunder, which I think was early 90s, late 80s.
Right, so Days of Thunder came out, they released in 1990, and that's certainly the first film that she made in America, I'm pretty sure, as a Hollywood film. She goes to the States to make the movie. She was in a few films that were pretty big, like Dead Calm the year before was quite a big movie that had like Billy Zane in it.
So that's Sam Neill as well.
And Sam Neill.
Yeah.
But that's an Australian film.
Yeah.
But that was pretty big. And I think on the basis of that is that was probably the movie that was the one that went, right, let's have her in Hollywood.
Yeah, because I mean it was 7 years after this.
Yeah,
She went to Hollywood.
She's very young in this, 16, 15, maybe 15, 16, I think, sort of age time.
Yeah, and she stands out in it, I'd say, as by far the best actor, and that includes the adults.
Yeah, absolutely. She's definitely the best person in it. You can see, she's still young, but you can see the potential, you see the talent, it's there.
Yeah,
and as long as she's given the right opportunities, she's going to be a big star. And,
which happened.
Yeah.
Do you just want to summarise what there is of a plot? For this?
Sure. So we start off by meeting the two main guys, Goose and PJ, very enthusiastic BMX bikers.
Yeah.
And they meet up with Judy, who's also a BMX biker, but she hasn't got a bike at the moment, so they help her out to get money.
After they get fired?
After she's fired, this is kind of... We're not quite sure if they have met before and they know each other before, or if this is their first meeting.
I think they do say they haven't met before.
Yeah, but whether that was sort of like them trying to get her out, get out of the situation with her boss, or not, is them trying to be clever or whatever. I don't know. You're not quite sure. But if they hadn't have known each other, they become very friendly very quickly. Yeah. Like they basically had known each other all their lives, sort of thing. Yeah. Which is very typical of these kind of movies. And so the three of them, there's our three main characters. They become friends. They want a BMX track, but they haven't got enough money to afford to build one, to get one. So that's kind of their goal. On the other side, we have the villains who we first meet robbing a bank. That's what they do. They rob banks.
They're nasty.
They're not good. Yeah. And so after they've robbed a bank of successful robbery, their boss is telling them about a new job, which is going to be the biggest one they've ever done. And a part of the job that what they need is these walkie-talkies that will be all fixed to the same frequency, so they can hear the people that they're going to be robbing and the police and everyone. They'll be able to keep an eye on what's going on. So make the job successful, sort of thing. It's not explained extremely well, but that's kind of the gist of it. Anyway, they're going to go pick up these walkie-talkies, but before they can, they're already picked up by the BMX Bandits, who don't realise what they've got, but they've found something, and they've taken it themselves, and it turns out the walkie-talkies, which they'll use in order to sell to make money so they can get Judy back and everything. So their story is that the villains have to find the kids, find the walkie-talkies, and that's basically the premise of the story, which is all very much built up early on in the film, and for a big majority of the movie after the plot is established, it's pretty much chases. Yeah.
Lots of chases, well filmed chases.
Yeah, extremely well, I think, for the budget and everything, which is minimal. I think 1.5 Australian dollars million, obviously. But yeah, so there's quite a small budget, and considering the way it looks, and there's some of the stunts and things that go on in it as well. There's some explosions and buildings being knocked over and things. It's not a nothing film. The director is known for this. His name's Brian Trenchard Smith, who I'm a little fan of. I've seen some other films of his well after I saw this one. In fact, when I'd seen some of his other films and then found out he'd made this as well, I was quite surprised.
I'm assuming he went to Hollywood as well?
I think maybe a little bit later on. Yeah, later on in his career. Certainly, in time that he's more well known, he was making films in Australia.
Okay.
The ones that he's known for, like this one and Turkey Shoot and a few others, which are kind of cult... exploitation, Ozploitation things. Tarantino's a massive fan,
so he should be.
That sort of thing, which you can actually see if you even just watching this one, some of the shots, the way it's laid out and stuff, and that kind of it's that whole sort of attitude. I think there's kind of a rebellious attitude to the filmmaking, which is quite cool. If you've seen, though he didn't make it's George Miller who made Mad Max. There's quite a lot of that similarities in the way the shots are. They look really risky. They look like they've been shot like handheld outside of a moving car kind of thing, low to the ground. One
of the chase scenes, they end up going into a water world swimming place. And go down the flumes and stuff. That's quite well done. And that's probably just gone down with a camera.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's got a bit of a feel of guerrilla filmmaking to it. Which is kind of cool.
I'd like to think that the chase scenes were just done. Like they go onto a rugby pitch if they just invaded, but obviously not. But that would be fun. But there's lots of basically they get as much BMX action in this film as they can.
It's incredible, really, because there's, like I say, they build the plot up so you make sure that you establish all the pieces where there isn't much BMXing going on, and then it's just loads. So there's a little bit at the beginning, then there's plot. And then it's just BMXing pretty much.
And there's a really interesting kind of spooky graveyard scene. Which
doesn't have any BMXing in. No, it's really well done.
And it kind of gives it that. It does give it a sort of fun kids element. But also, I imagine bits of it might have actually scared young kids.
I think so.
Because the criminals have got masks on and stuff. The criminals are proper. Let's talk about the villains to start with. The two main ones, Moustache and what was the other one?
Whitey's his name because he has white hair.
Yeah, that's it. And the other one's got a moustache.
Yeah, the one's got a little pencil moustache.
But they look proper cartoon villain. They reminded me of the two from 101 Dalmatians. And they're a bit Home Alone with the bungling, hitting each other in the head, calling each other near swear words, like they use the word poo a lot, twice. But they're fun, and they kind of. They threaten the kids by saying, "Oh, I'll kill you" and things like that. But you never take it seriously.
This is it. The way that you do this is, I think this was very much thought of while they were making the film as well. That they wanted to make the movie for kids, but there were elements to the story that were perhaps a bit adult like this. So how do you get away with that kind of thing? And the way you do it is by making them really buffoonish, and make it so they really have no chance. You can see very well that they're not. They have the idea of being a threat, but they're not a threat.
And the whole film, it's got that thing that most kids' movies have, where the adults are all a bit stupid, and the police in this are not far off Police Academy bumbling.
Yeah, a little, without the just sort of raunchiness element to them.
Well, there's a bit of raunchiness between the two of the cops. There's a bit of like touching each other up and stuff.
Yeah, that's true. But it's nothing. It's nothing to the extreme of like Police Academy.
Yeah, and some of the humour. There's a recurring role of a vicar. A lot of stuff happens to the vicar.
This is very British kind of carry on and Ealing comedy type kind of humour. Yeah, which is clearly the influence is there.
Yeah. At one point, is it the vicar accident? It isn't a vicar accident. He touches someone up with a bit of you dirty pervert.
Yeah.
I like that bit.
There's a lady. She stops to do something, and there's a man sitting next to her, and then they go. The BMX Bandits go by on their bikes and accidentally hit the girl with something on the arse. And she assumes that the man's touching her up, and so she gives him a big punch.
Yeah,
does him, you dirty perv.
Yeah, but it's harmless and funny.
Yes, I think that's the idea.
And the two, there's really the two leads, PJ and Goose.
Yes, and Judy.
She sort of joins their friendship. Yeah. Let's talk about those two because I mean the acting's not great, and the one downfall for this film, I think, is the dialogue doesn't seem natural between any of the characters, really.
No.
Nicole Kidman stands out. She seems natural. She seems like a real person in amongst this.
Yeah.
Almost like some of it is like nativity play acting, I think. But you can tell they're scripted and there's funny lines that are just not delivered that well. But you've got to think these are young actors. It's not a big budget film.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't ruin it, but.
No, I mean it's not. I completely agree with everything you're saying. Like, but that's not the thing of the film, is it?
No.
Is like, but it's obviously made for children, and they want the sort of the characters to come across, I suppose, a little bit larger than life, a little bit unnatural in that sense, so that kids can go, oh wow, they're great, aren't they? They're good, fun characters.
Well, this is, I mean, kids of that age, if they're 14, 15, if this situation, most of the kids would probably just cry and run away.
Yeah.
So they've got to make them heroes and also cartoony.
Yeah, that's what I mean. The whole cartoon. There's a huge element to it that is important. That's importantly put in there that it's not realistic.
Yeah,
it is like a cartoon. It is a bit kind of I mean, the bikes make swooshy sounds when they do pretty much nothing. So sometimes you get this idea, this kind of feeling of oh wow, woo, bit more than what they are in reality.
And I don't think anyone comes off a bike once. The hero, they're all very, and the stunts are great. It's not them doing the stunts, but if I think you wouldn't really. Well, firstly, you don't think about it, but nothing stands out. It's not like
I mean, only people that are really stickler types who are going to look at every single element and little piece and go, oh yeah, that's definitely not them, is it? You don't care.
Yeah, and it's done so well that nothing stands out. So you think, and there's clearly someone wearing a Nicole Kidman wig for some of it, which actually looks quite good. It's not like the hair length's different or anything.
Yeah, it's interesting that they couldn't find. I looked this up. They couldn't find a female stunt person to do the stunts. So it is an 18-year-old guy in a wig.
Okay, I wouldn't have known.
Yeah,
but
it's interesting that they couldn't find a woman to do it. I don't know.
But Nicole Kidman, it says in one of the IMDb facts, like she did brush up on her bike riding skills for the role.
Yeah,
and a lot of it is her.
It's absolutely. When they're just riding, it's them. Yeah. But when they're doing the stunts.
Yeah, and I think it's very, very of its time, and I like the fact that. Like every kid in it has a BMX. They're all out on the bikes all the time. I think I criticised it in Ernest Scared Stupid one because they seem to just have bikes for no reason. But this is obviously it's the plot, and it's good to see kids out enjoying themselves. I don't know if nowadays it would be called TikTok bandits or something.
They're all out on TikTok.
Yeah,
or out and about doing a TikTok.
Yeah. I can imagine. But I can imagine kids, even now you'd show this to a kid and they'd go, I want a BMX.
Well, you'd hope so. It clearly, I mean, it's not, as far as I'm aware, it's got no endorsement or funding by any BMX company. Yeah. But the film is a BMX advert, right? And it is very much of the time in the 80s. I remember loving this film mainly because I thought BMX was cool, like really cool. I didn't have one myself. I knew some people that did, and I knew some people that were actually pretty good at it for their age and stuff. But I never had one, and I used to always think, I really, wish I did have one.
Yeah.
And this film is a big part of that. It's not just the BMXs themselves; it's also just the look. There's a lot of aesthetic fetishism in this movie that's about like, ooh, wow, look how cool BMXs look.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of it as a kid. You'd just be like, oh, wow, they look so cool. The bright colours and everything. Yeah. Because back then, they're nothing like they are now. You don't get BMXs like this today. Back in the 80s, they were all about looking bright and colourful.
And then the same with the helmets.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Everything, the whole get-up, and the whole look.
One thing I do like in it is, obviously they probably had to do it, but they've always got their helmets on, their pads, and the first thing at the end credits is a warning: don't imitate it.
Yeah,
I assume
done by professionals. Yeah.
It also means don't imitate the crime.
Yes. We'd hope so.
But they're not. The kids they want to flog the walkie-talkies and stuff. They're not the most.
Yeah, which is brought up, and you're absolutely right. It's true. And if they hadn't brought that up in the film, that would be a bit dodgy, really, for a kids' movie. Yeah, they are. I suppose that's why they're called bandits in a way. They are. Yeah. They've stolen something and they're flogging them. The thing they've stolen. So it's
they are the rebels, really.
Yeah.
And. And one of them really reminded me of, I said it during it, Eric Idle doing an impression of an Australian. But he was always basically boasting that he watches horror films, probably adult films that he shouldn't be watching. Yeah. I like that character. Once you got over the...
Yeah, that's
the
Goose.
Yeah,
he's the sort of the more... Right, so the two are distinguished pretty much by the one who does the more of the wisecracking and more about talking, and then there's the one that's a bit more good looking and a bit more muscly, and he's clearly he's like the eye candy.
And Goose is a bit jealous of this. Doesn't.
Just
want to mention that we're recording this above a pub and you can hear the sign squeaking because of the weather. If you're listening to this at home, don't keep taking your headphones off and listen and see if there's something. It is this. It's not someone preparing a BMX in the background, which would be nice. But it's a well-paced film as well. There's lots goes on. Yeah. It felt fairly short. I think it was
no more than 87
minutes.
There we go.
Yeah. But you got? Did you get hold of a second-hand copy of this?
I did. I mean, I don't know if they still, if you can still get a DVD of it first hand. But the one I got, they're just selling loads on eBay, and I thought, right, well, I was wanting to do this, so I thought, right, we'll just get one.
So it's still it's on the A streaming service. I forget which one. It's a free one. I had if I was to watch it not on this DVD, there's an app you can download and it's all perfectly legal, so you can watch it legally. But for a film that is nearly 40 years old,
that was something I wanted to bring up. Was the age of it?
It feels obviously that they made this and they caught it wasn't like after the BMX big phase. It was released right during it. For me, it actually feels a little newer than that. It feels sort of mid to late 80s opposed to early.
Interesting.
I don't really know why, but especially as an Australian film, I thought it might have looked cheaper than it does. But if you think of Early Neighbours, which was 88, it's got that film. This is 5 years before that. It certainly...
Well, the director has a lot to do with that. The director was, and still, he's not dead, but I don't know if he makes any movies nowadays, but Brian Trenchard Smith is, in Australia anyway, very well respected for making things look much better than you think they should do. He's very good at making a small budget look like it's a bit bigger. I mean, this is clearly made, though the plot is thin, the acting's not great, it's clearly made by someone who knows what they're doing. There's great, like I said, there's great camera shots in it. It's paced extremely well. It looks good. Like it just looks like, I'm not watching something that's just cheap.
I mean, I thought it might be like TV movie like, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
And if you look at, he's got 63 credits.
Yeah.
And ones that stand out for me is he done Leprechaun 3 and Leprechaun 4, the one in space.
That's right.
And they're films that, the first one's low budget and the sequels they got lower budget during. But to make he's got him to make these films look more expensive than they were.
Absolutely.
He also done Night of the Demons too.
He did Night of the Demons too.
And I haven't seen it, but in 1998 he done a film called Atomic Dog.
Yeah.
I'm sold.
Right, you should see Atomic Dog.
Have you seen Atomic Dog?
I have not seen Atomic Dog, but I'm sure it's great.
I mean, it can't not be.
But the ones I have seen of his, so I've seen Turkey Shoot, which is an absolutely crazy movie with lots of gore and blood and stuff. It's a dystopian kind of action movie, where people are basically hunted for sport type thing.
Okay.
And what else I've seen? Dead End Drive-In, which again is dystopian kind of thing, where people are sort of held up in this prison that's a drive-in, and again lots of blood, lots of swearing. These are just exploitation-y type movies that are very good, in my opinion, if you're interested in those kind of things, especially Australian. Feel very Australian. These are not American movies; these are very Australian movies. And I'm sure that people in America that were interested in, like Quentin Tarantino, interested in Australian filmmaking would have looked at his films of the 80s and gone, wow, brilliant, fantastic, I want more of this. But he also made BMX Bandits, and on the basis of that, he also made some other kid films, or kid-friendly films, which I haven't seen, but I'm sure are also very good. But yeah, what he was capable of doing was to, like I said, make something that was of a smaller budget look a little bit, look like it have a little bit more to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm a fan. Like every single film of his that I've seen. There was another one, in fact, in the 70s as well, which is a kung fu kind of movie. It's kind of like a cross between a sort of Hong Kong and Australian film called The Man from Hong Kong. We should do that one as well. It's hilarious. Yeah, so those kind of films, sort of, genre movies that are clearly, for the people that like the exploitation of the budget, the B movie type.
Yeah,
type movie, but looking a bit better than you would expect.
Yeah, do you think he didn't write this or anything?
No.
So I think he was in as a hired hand.
Yes, he was, because originally, he came onto the project later, I think, which is often a thing that happened to him. People say, "Oh, well, you should get this guy. He's actually pretty good." Sort of thing.
Yeah,
so he was,
But to have 63 credits working up until fairly recently, I think. And he'd done quite a few movies before this. I mean, I always thought that this was a big hit.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was. I think it's
no. I think it might have got its money. I don't even know if it got its money back.
But it was one because there's nothing. They could show this on TV and not really have to cut it. So I think it got a lot of probably on cable and stuff years ago, and it was on.
Yeah.
And then, so when you'd have seen it, would you say it would have been early 90s you first saw it? Because would Nicole Kidman have been a star?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly what it would have been. Yeah, I think it would have been like 1991, something like that. I mean, I didn't know who she was. I think I had, strangely enough, I think I'd seen posters with her, like photos of her, I think, but I don't think I'd seen her in anything. And I hadn't clocked either that she was the same person at the time until later on. It's like, oh, that's the girl from BMX Bandits, and she's really famous now.
I mean, if you look at her career, really, apart from more recently with things like Paddington, she's not really, apart from maybe Batman Forever in '95, been in much that was kiddie friendly. I mean, Days of Thunder was only a PG, but it's not really a kids film.
Yeah, I remember seeing it. I saw it like a few years after it came out, like 93 sort of time, like 4, and I remember not liking it.
I remember thinking it was a bit boring.
Yeah, and I didn't really think it was, kids that talk for kids.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, I mean, it was a PG, but it was basically sold as Top Gun with cars.
Yeah, and I didn't really like Top Gun either as a kid. So
when I think about Top Gun, I liked the flight scenes and that sort of thing as a kid, but as a film, I think it was one I said I liked more than I actually did because it was kind of cool to like it. Maverick's fun though, the new one. I
haven't seen it. Can't comment.
No. Okay. It's terrible but brilliant.
Like this.
Yeah. Well, it's not as good as this. There's so much to talk about. I mean, we mentioned the graveyard scene. That was cool. Loads of action. We haven't mentioned much about what you said before about the being compared to the Goonies. I mean, this was a few years before.
This is interesting, right? So this is the interesting thing about anyone that makes reviews online or whatever, or talks about films nowadays, talks about the movies from the past today, is that they're all going to get compared to whatever the big one was up around the time. And people, I think, really they either don't know or tend to forget that when movies are made, are in the process of being, so before they're even filmed, stories are being created, even before the script writing and all this stuff, people are coming up with ideas from all over the place, from all different, nothing's completely unique. People are coming up with new ideas, based on whatever, and a lot of the time, a lot of the influences are from similar places. So if you think of a film like Goonies, the inspiration for that might have been from similar inspirations that the people who made the BMX Bandits made.
Yeah.
The BMX Bandits comes before the Goonies, right?
Yeah.
So to say that it's a rip-off of Goonies is incorrect. But what it might be is that they are both being, influenced and thought of in similar ways by completely different people.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's made for kids. Kids are it's around this era where there's more films of the kids are the stars.
Yes.
That seemed to be a sort of 80s thing, really.
Yes.
I think there's more of that.
Certainly.
And then there's usually more boys than girls.
Yeah,
and in this
absolutely.
And there's the tomboyish one they fancy. That happens a lot in these films. And then there's and I don't know if you'd do it now, the one thing you probably wouldn't do it, is the overweight kid who's sort of the end of jokes. I don't think you would do that nowadays.
No.
There's two in this film. One's credited as Fat Kid, but
the one's credited as, I think, the creep.
Yeah,
who is the main one.
There's comedy there. But in this, it's more. He is overweight and he's always eating, but the other kids don't really. They just don't like him because he's mean.
Yeah, he's sort of the rich mean kid.
Yeah,
whose parents spoil him. It's a classic trope.
Yeah, I do like that he's walking about with 2 ice cream.
Yeah, and hilarious. But he's also on a bike. He's a BMXer too.
And he comes out at the end when they get all the kids together in the town at the end, and he's on their side.
Exactly.
And it's
even though it's just grassed them up 7 minutes previous.
But he's doing the right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
He's I mean there's worse. Yeah, I'd say the character in the Goonies is a lot meaner than this, and there's one in another film I've done in the first series of this is the Monster Squad, which was also seen as a Goonies rip-off. But I'd say it's just a group of kids, and you do have each kid. I mean, nowadays Stranger Things, which they're saying is a homage to all that. You had Super 8 a few years ago. It's still a thing.
Absolutely, completely. And this one, to me anyway, is much nicer than all of those films. I don't know what it is about. I actually have quite a big fondness for Australian cinema. can't really tell you why, completely. But one thing that I can say is they always feel a lot more. Even the nastier stories, they always seem got this bit of a nicer feel to them than a lot of American films of similar types do. And they don't seem so mean-spirited to me.
No, exactly. Yeah, and the humour's there, but it's not. The Australians are sort of known for having like a sweary, nasty sense, but I always see it as more cheeky.
Yes, it is. It's completely cheeky. Yeah, there's lots of. It's very similar to British comedy, I think, in that respect.
Very likeable as well. Yeah. It's very and with this, it feels mentioned the Goonies and Monster Squad. This film feels there's no supernatural element or anything like that. It feels realer. Yeah, whereas the Goonies could kind of, but then you got the sort of deformed character at the end. It's kind of not real. Does that make sense?
It's odd, isn't it?
Yeah. So this to me feels. I think kids could relate to it more because they could see that happening.
Yeah, it's definitely something that would be more likely to happen than the Goonies is. Yeah.
And I mean, and it's the I don't know, the kids kind of, they don't seem real to me, but they seem like that's what kids would want to be like.
Yeah.
And the one I do, the Monster Squad, I feel the kids are more realistic. The Goonies, I have to say, the Goonies is one everyone compares it to, but I think Goonies isn't this masterpiece people think it is.
No, it's not.
It's perfectly fine. It's watchable. It's enjoyable. Quotable. But I think that film, it had a big budget. It had a big director, produced by Spielberg. Yeah. It was always going to be a hit.
Yeah, well, it was always going to be a big movie. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's why it's compared to a lot. But it's difficult to watch now, I think, as an adult. A lot of it. The kids are quite annoying. There's lots of shouting in it.
Can I also say, I agree with all of that, but a big part that's the difference between this film and a lot of American movies of that similar type, Goonies especially, is that Goonies the typical Spielberg plays up on the sentimentality in the family, with what's going on with the parents and how they're suffering, and how the kids are also suffering because of that, and they need to sort it out. The kids need to fix what's going on with their which is, you can look at that and go, yeah, that's great storytelling, and I don't necessarily disagree. It's a bit too corny and mawkish for my liking, but I understand why people like that. BMX Bandits, though, has none of that.
They don't have parents.
They don't have parents. They don't. The only adults are either the villains or the cops, and there are no parents of any kind within this film. That doesn't mean that they're living on the streets or they're having a hard life. In fact, completely the opposite. They seem to be doing fine.
And it doesn't.
And it's not like their parents aren't mentioned. They are mentioned. They're just not like a thing. They're not a part of the plot.
No, and it would interfere with the plot if there were parents. They're chasing the villains, and suddenly they're called in for tea.
Exactly.
All the people in it really are authority figures. Or villains. I mean, you've got like Nicole Kidman's boss at the beginning, some sort of northerner.
It is actually a classic thing in these kind of movies, as Australian movies, that there will be British people in there, and they will often be the kind of annoying people. Either they will be the villains because the main villain, the boss, he's also British. Yeah,
he seems to come straight out of a Guy Ritchie movie.
Yes,
and he looks like a sort of a cross between Chuck Norris and Charles Bronson, which is awesome.
Well, he was in Quatermass and the Pit, which I remember the 60s version.
Okay.
And he was also in the Long Good Friday with Bob Hoskins, which I love. That's a great movie. If you haven't seen that one, you should definitely seen that one. And and a few other things. But he's that kind of guy. He's either a heavy or he's a police.
Yeah, a police. I mean, he's quite good, isn't it? All the characters are exaggerated and
cartoonish, completely cartoonish.
I mean, it's one of those that if I had kids, I'd sit them down, I'd take them off their TikTok, the TikToks and the interwebs, and I'd make them watch this. I'd be like, this is what we used to do. That
but you'll get in trouble though. They'll just want BMXs and all the bits and all the gear and stuff. So you'd have to fork out for that.
I wouldn't. I'd buy them a BMX video game.
Okay. But a little cheaper.
Yeah. But I mean, BMXs are still a thing. Kids
absolutely, taken a lot more seriously, I think, these days, as in like a career. People take it up now, and some people get careers out of it. At this point, I think that was a thing as well, of course, but nowhere near like the kind of international money maker that it is today. Yeah. Same with skateboarding. There were skateboard movies, and skateboarding was very much a thing in the 80s, but nothing like what it is today.
No,
it's huge today.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's something. The fact it's called BMX Bandits, it's something quite cleverly. It's a product. It's like they've made a film from an existing franchise, but not had to pay for any rights. Yeah, which is quite good. I am really surprised that it didn't do so well. I'm also quite surprised by its IMDb 5.5. I thought it would be a lot higher.
I was thinking maybe a low 6.
Yeah, but I think it might be a lot of people have watched it recently as Nicole Kidman fans. And they've just been like, oh, that's a load of rubbish,
Maybe you might be right about that. I mean, what I see from it though, you get a lot of people, from these, just a quick glance at the reviews, you get quite a lot of people recognising it for what it is. And the same kind of feeling that I have for it, which is, it's not great, but it is a hell of a lot of fun, and should be seen as such, instead of just, look, it's rubbish.
I mean, I can't really. For what it is, I can't think they could have really done much of a better job.
No, I don't think so.
It's only got, just looking on Letterboxd, it's only got 2.8, which I think, I mean...
Well, that's, I mean, yeah, okay. It's close to 3, which, you know, for me, 3 is the correct, I would say, is the correct sort of thing for it.
Yeah.
You know, in the 3s.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say our ratings. I mean, it's got 67 on Rotten Tomatoes, which isn't bad. I mean, I'd say it's a 3-star film, but if I was a kid, it would be a 5-star.
Of course, as a child, absolutely. And this is, even though they are teenagers, this is made for, I mean, for a wide audience, but I think specifically it is for a young you know, from the ages of 10 to about 13, 14.
Yeah, it's that stage of little bit too old now for Disney animation and things like that. And it's like a crossover into a teen movie.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's a pre-teen movie.
Yeah, pre-teen.
Really.
Yeah, certainly.
So yeah, I mean, and that's why in these films, the kids are that little bit older because the little kids want to be teenagers.
Yeah, that's it. It's like that's what I want to be when I'm a bit older.
Yeah. I want to be a teenager. I want to be Emilio Estevez.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I mean,
Enrico Man.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, this is like the step before you'd start watching the John Hughes films and that sort of thing. And
definitely.
I think it's a solid film. Done a really good job. Really enjoyed it. It is one I'll watch again.
Yeah. It's easy to watch. It's like you don't watch it and you go, "Oh, that's a bit of a slog."
Yeah, no, there isn't. I mean, it's starting to get a little bit tough. I am really hungover.
Yeah,
so that might
fair enough.
That might be why. But no, it was the perfect film to watch when you're feeling a bit rough.
I think so.
It's fun. Not much of a plot, but enough of a plot.
Yeah, it's not hard work,
it didn't feel padded out. There was the right amount of chases. The chases were fun. The slapstick was fun. It was well made. The music was awesome. We should mention that.
Yeah, the music is great.
It's very 80s. You heard a little bit when we done the intro. It was in the background. It feels like an 80s Nintendo game.
Yeah.
And then there's a few songs in there as well, which I assume might have been made for the movie.
I think. Interesting. I'm not too sure. Maybe. Yeah. But I think they might have come out previous to the film, as a sort of a way to. I might be making this up completely, but I just get I get the feeling that they were probably songs that might have been that have been brought out, but to sort of like promote the film. They would have brought them out as singles, and to say, "Oh, these songs are going to be featured in the upcoming film." Yeah,
sort of thing that 10 years later Bryan Adams was doing for every film ever. So and the actual music, there's a really good. It's very very 80s. It's like
early,
Double Dragon.
Early 80s, Double Dragon. Certainly early 80s, computer games, like you say, Nintendo, and also very new wavy as well.
Yeah, and it's
pop music.
Got the right. It feels very 80s, but not over the top. It's got the bright colours and all this sort of thing, but it's not. It doesn't look like a spoof of itself.
No.
It generally feels of the time, but as I said earlier, a little bit later than that, I'd say, which I think is a plus.
That's amazing that you say that, because I mean, I completely don't feel like it is that. I think that it is very much. It does feel like an early 80s movie, but that just shows the ability of the filmmaker.
Yeah.
He's made a film that other people can look at and go, yeah, I'm surprised that was made when it was.
Yeah, I mean,
that's really cool.
Definitely 80s, but 80s is that long period.
I know what you. I understand that you're saying sort of like 80s.
And maybe it's like the haircuts and that don't look. I expect it to look more 70s than it did. And
I get you. Yeah, no, I do get you. But I mean, I don't know. At 83, which is when this came out, I don't know. To me, when I think like there's probably would have been shot in 82, perhaps. I just think when I think BMXing as well, I think that sort of era, it just feels completely right to me. But I also think of something like Fast Times, which is around the same time. To me, looks older than this. Really? Wow. But it might be because there's not that many characters in this. The villains are very cartoony, so look kind of timeless. Yeah. And the kids are just shorts and t-shirts. Absolutely. So for the most part, Or when they're not wearing their BMX stuff, Yeah, and the BMX stuff is how I picture BMX. Yeah, in the 80s, throughout the whole 80s. Yeah, and even early 90s, really. Yeah, sure. So I mean, it's kind of just this fun film that I think it's Australian, but not
I can see why it done well worldwide, because it's not like in your face.
Did really well over here in Britain. I think it did the best. It did in other countries. It did the best here.
But I think in the 80s, or a few years later, when this would have been shown on TV, Australia was huge. You had obviously Neighbours, Home and Away. Crocodile Dundee was a few years after this. So maybe it was bought up cheap, shown a lot to cash in on this.
I would think that's more than true. There were other things. I being our age, I do remember the late 80s pretty well when it comes to these kind of things. Australian invasion, as it were, was huge, not just here but also in the States. And this probably would have been a part of that, like brought back to go in with that.
Because what was Crocodile Dundee? 86,
87, I think.
So
and you also had that awful Young Einstein film, which did ridiculously well. And I remember at the time being advertised non-stop.
What was the guy's name in that?
Yahoo Serious.
Yeah, because he'd done a few films.
Yeah,
I saw Young Einstein in the cinema. It's weird. It's kind of, it's not great, and it really reminds me of the kind of Pauly Shore comedy.
Yeah.
I do try to mention Pauly Shore in every podcast.
That's good for you. Well done.
But it had that feel. And the poster for that, as soon as you said it, him with his hair, that was huge.
It was,
and forgotten now because it was not very good.
Yeah, but amazingly, see if people just, because there's so much stuff nowadays and things don't last long, like they just here and gone kind of thing, and then something else comes along. If you're young and you don't remember that, there was a time when something would be advertised constantly for a good number of months. Like it just would not go. It felt like it was never going to go away, and it was always going to be there. That was one of them, and now is completely forgotten.
Yeah,
but there was something about certain movies coming out of Australia around that time that they were just huge for being Australian.
And this was just prior to that.
Yeah.
So, but as we say, got caught up because it's something the TVs could show. And I remember the DVD you've got here looks like it isn't a cheap budget one, but I seem to remember it being like repackaged and sold really cheaply.
Right.
I think the same make.
Well, this is the only one that I saw online.
Or maybe it's a cheap video I saw of it.
Maybe.
Because you'd get the budget price ones.
Yeah.
And that was one that would pop up along with the Adam Sandler film Going Overboard.
Oh, yeah.
Girls Just Want to Have Fun, which we talked about before.
Yeah.
It all really... And it was sold, they'd put Nicole Kidman's face on it. I mean, her name is the only actor name on the cover.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because you've not heard of the others.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen the original cinema poster, so I'll put up with this podcast.
Yeah, that would be good. I do remember it. It had I think it's kind of like a drawing of the three, or at least it looks like it's very bright.
Yeah,
but almost makes it look a little bit sci-fi as well.
Yeah. I mean, this is I think a plus for the film. It's enjoyable and it's got no sci-fi element.
No.
I mean, you've sort of got a bit of a spooky scene, but that's all still real. It's people in masks. It's not. So it's just that 80s relatableness for kids.
This might sound a little odd, but I think aesthetically, just thinking of just science fiction and the way it was sold, like I say with the poster and everything, the colours and everything, it has I remember as a kid really liking the BMX look because it looked a bit kind of spacey agey, kind of a bit like you're a robot or something, with like the helmet, and it being very colourful and very much like something maybe from another planet almost, like it had that sort of aesthetic feel and look, just a vibe to it that I just thought, wow, so I think that is an element that it sells, and it makes these swooshy, like I say, they also make these swooshy sound effects kind of sounds when the bike's doing something, which is supposed to give the idea that you're doing something, I don't know, like amazing, something that you don't do otherwise, that you couldn't do otherwise kind of thing. And so there's that element to it that's just in the feel of it. Of course, there is nothing science fiction-y about it at all. But the bikes, and again with Turbo Kid, right? Just thinking, going back to what we talked, Turbo Kid being influenced by Turbo Kid is a sci-fi movie, and I think the fact that the bike being and the look of the bike and the colours and all that kind of element to it is important, I think, to it.
Well, Turbo Kid is kind of a mix of this and Mad Max.
Yeah, which is another Australian thing.
Yeah,
so it's interesting.
Yeah,
that's a Canadian film.
If you've not seen Turbo Kid, I recommend it. You probably wouldn't.
No, I would recommend it.
Yeah.
I absolutely would recommend it. I didn't like it like amazingly, but I would certainly recommend it if you want to look at something that's like new but loves the 80s.
Yeah, I mean that's the reason that I did do a podcast on that. For that reason, as like a special of a new film. But it's just a massive love letter to the 80s, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a film more recently that was sort of about everywhere now's. A few years kind of forgotten, but I think they're still doing a sequel.
Right.
So they should do a sequel to this with all the actors now.
Do you know, I love that there weren't any.
Yeah.
I just think it's great that it's its own little film, and it is remembered fondly by many different people. Fondly even to the point that there is a band who's still going, who started I think in the mid 80s, called BMX Bandits and named after the
cool.
film. So there's things like that. Mitchell and Webb also did a spoof of it in one of their sketches.
They did, didn't they? Yeah. But it's one that as well that I can't believe I'd never watched it. Everybody I know growing up seems to have watched it, remembered fondly, but not to the extent of you go into DVD store, whatever, and there's posters and T-shirts like you get now for Goonies is everywhere, Lost Boys is everywhere, Beetlejuice is everywhere. It's not that extent.
It's not.
But
it's not American. It's not American. I mean, that has to be a big element to it.
Yeah.
That it's not remembered because it doesn't have all of that Hollywood money.
Yeah.
The marketing of it is just not. It's not even really there. It was there, I think, at the time in Australia. And I think it was, like I say, I think it did well over here because, for whatever reason, it was just it was liked a lot. But I don't think it was in any kind of way ever sold. Yeah. To the point of like, yes,
but
kids must really love this movie.
I think it done well in the aftermath. I don't imagine it was a big cinema hit.
It wasn't.
Don't even know if it got to the cinema over here.
No, it did, and it did fairly well. I think it was like from what I remember reading, it was the 5th highest grossing film of the year.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and that was the best it had done anywhere. Yeah. So like I say, this is the best I believe that it done in the UK than any other country, but it still wasn't like a massive huge hit. I think, like I say, it might have made its money back, but I doubt it at the cinema.
Yeah. I'm just looking to see what else came out that year, because 83 is one of those years of
it's a weird one, isn't it?
It's just pre the big what I call 80s movies. Do you know what I mean? Most of the more memorable ones are a few years later, 85, with like Back to the Future.
Oh, if you mean like the real big, the massive, family, films for everybody films, certainly they would have been. I
mean, War Games was around the same time.
Yeah, same year.
There's not many family films. If you just type in movies you've got Octopussy.
Yeah. That would have been probably the biggest one here in the UK.
Yeah. Superman 3.
Oh, that would have been huge as well.
Yeah. But just looking at it, I mean, and it's the same year as National Lampoon's Vacation, the first one.
Yeah.
Now I watched that yesterday.
Yeah.
And that film felt a lot older than this.
Right.
Yeah. But I think it's because there's more emphasis on cars and products.
Yes.
You'll see like
the humour is also
soft drink cans and stuff.
Yes, product placements and all this kind of thing. Yeah, and there's a bit of that in this, but only of BMX stuff, right? Yeah. And so if you were into BMXing and of the time, then you would look at that nostalgically and be like, ooh, look at those, look at the mongoose sign for the BMX. But if you weren't interested in any of that kind of stuff, and Oakley helmets and stuff like that, if you weren't interested in any of that, if you don't know any of that stuff, it wouldn't look old.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a can of Coke or something from the 80s.
Yeah. Same year as Return of the Jedi, which I always thought was 82.
Yeah, 83, yeah. 83. So that was probably to me, that's the beginnings, really, isn't it? So Star Wars is truly, or you could say perhaps Jaws even, but Star Wars certainly is the beginning of that kind of massive, movies that are just huge summer blockbuster hits movies. But by the time you get to the mid 80s, you've got loads of.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly wouldn't get a film like this at the cinema nowadays. It would be made for TV or streaming.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a nice slice of 80s. I think it's one of those that is everybody's little hidden gem film, but it's actually a lot more well known than people.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely not one of the ones I would say is I've got loads of others that I could think of that I think very few people have seen.
Yeah.
I've always known of this film as being one that, lots of people had seen and lots of people had just remembered fondly. But because it's Australian, I suppose, it's not the massive sort of everyone talks about, and there's loads of merchandise and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right. So I think we've covered it well. We spoke for nearly 50 minutes. I hope you've enjoyed listening. Just anything else you've watched recently that you stood out, like an older film you've rewatched or watched that you want to give a quick mention and recommend to the listeners?
Well, I did mention a couple of those other films, this director's, which I think people should go see, because not go see, but hunt out sort of thing. And I don't think I've watched anything fairly old recently.
You've been more the modern stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a few, because of the time of year, I've seen a few horror movies. I've just come, it's Halloween's over with now, but I've seen a few horror movies recently. I don't know if I should recommend them or not. Depends if you like horror movies.
Yeah.
But those Terrifier films are okay, I suppose.
I've got them to watch, which a lot of people are talking about, and I'll give a little mention on another podcast of what I think when I eventually do watch them. But what I'm going to say is start thinking of Christmas movies.
Yeah.
Maybe you can find one that you enjoyed when you were younger that I haven't seen.
Yeah.
And then I can watch it and we can do it as part of the podcast. I do want to do an episode on Ernest Saves Christmas.
Have you seen Christmas Story?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's a sequel to that coming out this year, which is really interesting. I'm sure they've done a sequel and they've sort of forgotten about it and they're doing another sequel.
The weird thing about Christmas Story is, right, is that I saw that when I was a kid, and I don't remember anyone ever talking about it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I thought I was one of the very few people that of my age, or people I knew had seen it. And in the last 15 years, everyone's talking about it. Like it's one of these massive movies that everyone loved.
Yeah, I didn't see it till a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it was a friend of mine from Canada who recommended it to me.
Yeah, it's a Canadian movie.
Yeah, and I've got an American friend and a Canadian friend who love it.
Yeah.
One's a couple of years older than me, one's a couple of years younger, and they really like it. But recently a few people, like one of my housemates,
it just comes up on lists, or list things of that everyone does now, and it always gets mentioned, and I think that's why it's become really popular, because of the internet.
Yeah.
But because I did see it. It was on TV once when I was a kid, and I remember we taped it off the TV, and I thought it was great. I loved it. So that's one of those ones that over the years has become seen as this massive Christmas movie, which it wasn't. I don't remember it being like that when I was young.
Yeah, and it actually is a Christmas movie, unlike other films.
Well, sure, yes, it is very much a Christmas movie about a kid wanting to get a certain present for Christmas.
Yeah.
So,
and a massive influence for the Wonder Years as well.
Oh, without doubt.
Yeah. Yes. So, if you're listening and you've enjoyed it, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Give us the 5-star ratings on wherever you're listening. If you feel please do, it helps.
Yeah,
it's not just to look at it, it gets us more listeners as well.
Absolutely.
Any thoughts on BMX Bandits, message us right on the Instagram, right on the Facebook.
Love to know what people think.
If
they've seen it or want to see it now.
And I know it's November, but we'll have a few more episodes before Christmas ones, but do send us Christmas movie recommendations. Something different, something fun.
Something unusual, sort of ones that aren't talked about.
I'm gonna this year I'm gonna try not to watch Scrooged. That's one I watch every year. I'm gonna do a year without watching it, I think, and then I'll enjoy it more next year. But thanks for listening. That's Talk BMX Bandits with us.
Yes.
And any other movies from mainly we do 80s and 90s, but we'll go back to the 70s if need be. I don't really want to go into early 2000s yet. We'll leave that for a few years' time. But films that you think are underrated. Yeah. That's mainly what we do, isn't it?
Indeed.
So, right. Thank you very much, James.
You're welcome.
And we'll be back with another episode very soon.